All right. Eddie Hearn got somebody chasing him around, and his name is Thomas Hauser, documenting possible violations of the Ali Act by Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing in their attempt to have a Chavez Jr. fight against Daniel Jacobs. Let's talk about this foolishness and what it means for people that are signed with Matchroom. And I'm telling you, man, Eddie Hearn is either stupid or desperate, or both. But let's talk about it in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel, subscribers. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. Also, definitely make sure that you come to the live streams we do Monday through Friday and 8 a.m. Central Standard Time on Sunday. OG Boxing Talk, the weekending show with myself, Blood Boxing, KQKC Boxing, Curtis Anderson, and Trap House Boxing, where we break down the week in sports in boxing, not all sports, boxing. And we will be talking about this. I'm quite sure Blood will be putting it on the agenda. I find it particularly of interest because when I read this article, it was in Boxing Scene. Man, it took me back. Seriously, man, I felt like I was reading a brief written. I felt like I was reading a legal brief because Thomas Hauser, I'm not sure if he is or if he's not, but I think that the cat is a lawyer because the way that he writes it makes me believe that he is. And he's ripping Eddie Hearn, man. This is the same guy, by the way, who broke the story about the performance-enhancing drugs after the Oscar Rivas fight with Dillian White. So remember that first before we talk about this. Thomas Hauser is the guy that brought out the fact that Eddie Hearn allowed Dillian White to go into the ring with Oscar Rivas under the influence of performance-enhancing drugs. Remember that. Now we have Thomas Hauser and Eddie Hearn in another performance-enhancing drug-related issue where Eddie Hearn apparently is trying to let somebody who, instead of actually failing a drug test, is being treated as if he did because he refused to be tested. Now, if you've ever, and unfortunately I have, I'll make the admission, terrible thing. But if you ever get pulled over, and this was years ago, back in the 90s, I was pulled over on my birthday, was driving in DC, drove home, had a couple drinks, and they pulled me over because I was speeding. I refused to take the breathalyzer, and because I was like, nah, I'm not going to take the breathalyzer. I thought I was a smart ass. I was in law school. And they just were like, okay, sure, fine, come on in, took me in, they charged me, and guess what? They treated my refusal to blow into the breathalyzer as me having admitted guilt. So if you don't take, the same thing applies in the state of Nevada for performance-enhancing drug tests. When Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was in training, and the VADA officials came by to test him at the behest of Nevada State Athletic Commission, when he refused, they treated as if he was guilty. And obviously what that is meant to do is that is meant to get people to conform and take the test, right? We're not going to chase you around, Julio. If you don't take the test, we're just going to assume you're guilty and we're going to treat you like you're guilty. Pee in the cup, pee in the cup. If you don't pee in the cup, you're guilty. Julio didn't pee in the cup, so Julio's guilty, right? Nevada State Athletic Commission suspends him. And here comes the Eddie Hearn foolishness. Eddie Hearn jumps out there and says that Julio Cesar Chavez didn't have to take the test because he didn't have to pee because he hadn't signed for the fight yet. Only one problem, and that's why I'm telling you, you got to watch this Thomas Hauser guy. You see him around. Hey, man, you better dot your I's and cross your T's with Thomas Hauser around, because Thomas Hauser points out the fact that that is not the case. Nevada State Athletic Commission can get you tested as soon as the fighter asks to hold the fight. And since Matchroom Boxing had applied to put on an event in Nevada in this, I do believe that it was in this, the event is in December, whenever it is. But since they had already applied, then Nevada State Athletic Commission has the right to test the fighters right there. It didn't have anything to do with whether or not there were contracts signed between Matchroom and the fighter. The issue was whether or not there was an application turned in between Matchroom and the state. So, Eddie, it don't matter what you doing between you and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. It matters what happens between you and the state. And once you, as his promoter, went that way and decided you were going to do it, he was open for testing. He did not agree to be tested. Therefore, the Nevada State Athletic Commission suspends him. Now, that right there wouldn't be a big deal for Eddie Hearn, right? Eddie Hearn says, hey, maybe I just don't have the fight since he did. But no, Eddie goes to Arizona and is trying to move the fight. That, my friend, is when the Ali Act comes into play. That pisses off Nevada State Athletic Commission, and Nevada State Athletic Commission is going to had a conversation with Arizona and let them know that it was ticking them off that you would do that because it's a violation of the Ali Act. And why is it a violation of the Ali Act? Let's go through the three main purposes of the Ali Act without getting into it in any great detail. Ali Act is supposed to do three things. One, it is supposed to protect boxers from coercive tactics from promoters, right? Examples are where Tim Witherspoon was forced to sign 4 different contracts. One made Don King his promoter. Another one made Don King's nephew his manager. Another one gave the same managerial power to Don King, but 50% of his purse. And the other one was a blank contract that just allowed Don King to do whatever Don King wanted to, right? So those are coercive tactics. There are other examples. As that as well. The second goal of the Ali Act is to prevent manipulation of rankings. In cases where the WBO was found having bribed or extorted bribes from, asked for bribes from different people to get fighters ranked to the tune of like $330,000 to get fighters ranked, to put them in the rankings, right? Also, there's another guy that was actually dead, and when he was dead, he elevated in the rankings to the WBO. The reason why they don't want people to do that, obviously, is because you put fighters in dangerous situations when they get rankings that they don't deserve, and they get put into a mismatch with a fighter that is much better than them, but the ranking says that they're good, but they're not actually good, and therefore you get fighters hurt, right? So the second is manipulation of rankings. The third, and this is where Eddie is treading on, is forum shopping. The fact that the United States of America has 50 states, and 50 states have powers and all rights and privileges not specifically granted to the state not specifically granted to the federal government by the states, are reserved for the states. As a result, you have a bunch of different state boxing commissions: Nevada State Athletic Commission, New York State Athletic Commission, California State Athletic Commission, Arizona State Athletic Commission. And the Ali Act is regulations and federal regulations in place to ensure that that promoters don't take advantage of that system by shopping around their fights to the jurisdictions or to the states that have the most laxed regulations. So if you initially apply for something in Nevada, like you fight in Nevada and you violate a rule in Nevada, the other states are supposed to honor that. That's also, aside from the act, that's also related to the full faith and credit statute in the U.S. Constitution. But hey, man, that's what I talked about in the other video. Regardless, That's what this issue is. Forum shopping. Eddie Hearn has a fighter that fails a drug test. Per se, and what is it? Kind of like statutory, issues. Like if you have a relationship with a girl that is not fully an adult, they don't even care. That's just per se. The fact that you did it means you're guilty. You are per se guilty. When you do not take a drug test, and Nevada State Athletic Commission, when they have the right to test you, you are per se guilty, and they treat you that way. So that's what happens. Now, this is the thing why I'm telling you, man, you got to watch out with Thomas Hauser. Thomas Hauser now is having a book on Eddie Hearn. A book of performance-enhancing drug-related issues, and he is clearly keeping an eye on Eddie Hearn and Eddie Hearn's shenanigans very closely. I would not be surprised if you see a book coming out about him very soon, man, because I just find it really interesting that a guy like Thomas Hauser would continually break stories and write stories about Eddie Hearn and performance-enhancing drugs. And I believe that Thomas Hauser really does have a love for the sport of boxing. But if you read that article, that's what that's about. The downside for this, for people that are around Eddie Hearn, is that Eddie Hearn could be suspended from doing business. Matchroom could be suspended from doing business in Nevada. And why would a boxer, if you can't fight in Nevada and you can't fight in New York, dude, there's not a lot of places. The only other place to really go is LA for to have big fights. But Nevada, that's the gambling city. That's pretty much the crux of it. And also, it's a place where the author of the Ali Act, or the major proponent of the Ali Act, the late Senator John McCain, is from. So if you're spitting on the Ali Act, and a byproduct of it that I would hope would happen is that they would fix some of the problems in the Ali Act, the main one being the enforcement of it and making people actually abide by it. But Eddie Hearn is just straight flaunting it, trying to do this. If he takes this fight, if he takes this fight with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. to Arizona while he's suspended in California, that would be crazy. But honestly, I don't even think that I don't think Arizona would do it. But if Arizona did do it, that's going to be some craziness. Anyway, it is what it is. Let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.